Ellie Brennan pressed her dead husband's wedding ring against her lips one last time, then dropped it into the dust of Elkhorn, Montana. Behind her, twin daughters clutched flour sacks, holding everything they owned. Across the platform stood Silas McAllister, the man the whole territory called cursed. The man she'd married by letter 3 weeks ago. The man who hadn't spoken a single word since she'd stepped off the stagecoach. She'd traded one grave for another. She just didn't know it yet. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe now and stay until the end. You'll discover why the most broken man in Montana became the one everyone underestimated. The stagecoach door swung open, and Eleanor Brennan stepped into a town that smelled like horse manure and judgment. She didn't look back. Looking back meant remembering Boston, the creditors, the whispers at Frederick's funeral. Looking back meant seeing the life she'd lost, the life that had never really been hers to begin with. "Mama," Clara's voice trembled, "everyone's staring." "Let them stare." Ellie squeezed her daughter's hand. "We've survived worse than stares." Rose, Clara's twin, pressed closer to her other side. The girls were 8 years old, mirror images of each other except for their eyes. Clara's held fear. Rose's held fire. Ellie scanned the platform. 15, maybe 20 people had stopped their business to watch the Boston widow arrive. A woman in calico crossed her arms and whispered to the man beside her. A shopkeeper paused mid-sweep to gawk. Even the horses tied to the rails seemed to turn their heads. And then she saw him. Silas McAllister stood apart from everyone else, like the town had drawn an invisible line around him that no one dared cross. He was taller than she'd expected, broader. The letters his sister had written made him sound like a broken old man seeking companionship. But the figure standing 30 feet away couldn't be more than 40, with sun-darkened skin, shoulders built for hard labor, and a scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline. He held his hat in both hands, turning the brim in slow rotations. He didn't move toward her. Ellie released her daughter's hands. "Wait here." "Mama!" "I said wait." She crossed the platform alone. Each step felt like walking into deep water. The whispers grew louder behind her, but she kept her chin high, her back straight. She'd learned in Boston that showing fear only fed the wolves. When she stopped 3 feet from Silas McAllister, he still didn't speak, just looked at her with eyes the color of storm clouds, gray, unreadable, and impossibly tired. "Mr. McAllister?" Ellie kept her voice steady. "I'm Eleanor Brennan, your wife." Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or surprise that she'd actually come. "Ma'am?" His voice was low, rough from disuse. "You came." "I said I would." "Most don't." She didn't ask what he meant by that. Didn't want to know how many women had answered his advertisement, only to take one look at him and flee. "Those your girls?" He nodded toward Clara and Rose. Clara and Rose, they're twins, 8 years old. His jaw tightened. Just for a moment, so quick she almost missed it. "I wasn't expecting two." Ellie's stomach dropped. "The letter mentioned I had children." "It said children, not twins." "Is that a problem?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Wagon's ready." He turned and walked toward a weathered buckboard without another word. Ellie stood frozen, watching him load their bags. 3 carpet bags, 1 trunk, 2 flour sacks, with movements that were efficient and completely impersonal. "Mama?" Clara had come up beside her. "Is he angry?" "No, sweetheart." He looks angry. He looks tired. There's a difference. Rose appeared on her other side, studying Silas with narrowed eyes. He didn't say hello to us. Some people aren't good with words. Is he going to be our new papa? Ellie didn't answer. She took both girls' hands and led them toward the wagon. The woman in calico stepped directly into their path. "Mrs. Brennan, is it?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Ida Harmon. My husband owns the mercantile." "Ma'am?" Ellie nodded politely. "We were just discussing how brave you must be." Ida's gaze swept over the twins with barely concealed curiosity. "Coming all this way to marry a man like Silas McAllister." "A man like him?" "Well," Ida lowered her voice, though it still carried. "You know what they say. I'm afraid I don't. About what happened up in those mountains. About his first wife." She practically whispered the last two words, as if they were profanity. "And the child." Ellie felt Clara's hand tighten in hers. "Mrs. Harmon, I appreciate your concern, but it's just that some folks think he's not quite right anymore. In the head, I mean." Ida tapped her temple. 3 years alone up there after they died. A man doesn't come back from something like that. Not really. "Mama!" Rose tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go?" "Yes, we're leaving." Ellie stepped around Ida, pulling the girls with her. "Good day, Mrs. Harmon." "Don't say I didn't warn you," Ida called after them. "When you see what's in that house, remember I tried to tell you." Ellie didn't turn around. She lifted the girls into the wagon bed, settled them on a blanket Silas had spread there, and climbed onto the seat beside him. He didn't look at her. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." He released the brake and guided the horses onto the rutted road leading out of town. Ellie felt every eye in Elkhorn tracking their departure, watching, waiting, expecting failure. Let them watch, she thought. Let them all watch. The silence stretched for miles. Ellie had prepared herself for many things: poverty, hardship, a loveless arrangement. She hadn't prepared for this. For sitting beside a man who seemed to have forgotten how to be human, whose presence was a wall of stone that no word could penetrate. She tried twice to start a conversation. Both times, he answered in monosyllables and returned to staring at the horizon. Behind her, the twins whispered to each other. "I don't like him," Clara murmured. "Shh, he'll hear." "I don't care." Ellie turned. "Girls!" They fell silent, but their eyes spoke volumes. The landscape rolled past, endless grass giving way to pine forests, the mountains growing larger with each mile. It was beautiful country, Ellie admitted, wild and vast and terrifying in its emptiness. She'd spent her whole life in cities, in drawing rooms and ballrooms, in the cramped boarding house where she'd waited, day after day, for any response to her desperate letters. This place had no walls, no ceiling. Just sky and earth and the suffocating weight of a future she couldn't see. "Mr. McAllister." "Silas." He didn't look at her. "My name's Silas." "Silas, then. How much farther?" "Another hour." "Is the house large?" "No." "How many rooms?" "One. And a loft." "One room." Ellie's throat tightened. "Where will everyone sleep?" "Lofts for the girls. There's a bed for you." "And you?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Barn," he finally said. Ellie stared at him. "The barn?" "I sleep there." "You sleep in your own barn?" "Yes, ma'am." "May I ask why?" His hands tightened on the reins. The leather creaked. "No," he said. "You may not." The cabin appeared as the sun began to set. a small structure nestled in a valley with a creek running behind it. The logs were weathered but solid. A stone chimney rose from one side. The porch sagged slightly, but the barn beside it stood straight and well-maintained. Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. "We're here." Ellie climbed down before he could offer help. Not that he'd seemed inclined to. The girls scrambled out behind her, pressing close. "It's small," Clara whispered. "It's ours," Ellie said. "That makes it perfect." She walked toward the cabin, her boots crunching on dry grass. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open, and the smell of dust and loneliness rushed out to meet her. One room, as he'd said. A cook stove against one wall. A rough table with 2 chairs. Just 2, not 4. A bed in the corner, neatly made. Shelves holding tin plates, cups, a few books. And there, by the window, catching the last light of the setting sun, a cradle. Ellie stopped breathing. The cradle was beautiful, hand-carved from dark wood with delicate patterns etched into the sides. It was clearly the work of many hours, many days, crafted with a skill that bordered on artistry. And it was empty. Completely, achingly empty. "Mama?" Rose had come in behind her. "What's that?" Ellie couldn't answer. She walked toward the cradle as if pulled by invisible strings, her hand reaching out to touch the smooth wood. It wasn't dusty. Someone had been caring for it, polishing it, keeping it clean for what? "You weren't supposed to see that." Silas's voice came from the doorway. Ellie turned. He stood with one hand braced against the frame, his face unreadable in the dim light. But something had changed in his eyes, something raw and wounded that he was trying desperately to hide. "It's beautiful," Ellie said softly. "It's not for you." "I didn't think it was." He pushed past her, grabbed the cradle, and carried it to the far corner. He covered it with a sheet, quick, rough movements, then turned his back to her. "I'll bring in your bags." His voice was flat. "Supper's in the larder, salt pork, potatoes. I'll eat in the barn." "Silas." "Don't." He stopped at the door. "Don't ask about the cradle. Don't ask about before. You're here to cook and clean and take care of those girls. That's the arrangement. That's all it is." He walked out. Ellie stood in the cabin that was now her home, surrounded by another woman's life. Because now she could see it, the details she'd missed before. Women's clothes hanging on pegs by the door. A hairbrush on the shelf with long, dark strands still caught in the bristles. Moccasins, beaded and beautiful, sitting beside the bed. His first wife. The one Ida Harmon had whispered about. She was everywhere in this room. Her presence was woven into every inch of it. And Ellie had just walked into her grave. "Mama?" Clara stood in the center of the room, tears streaming down her face. "I want to go home." "This is home now, sweetheart." "No, home is Boston. Home is Papa. I want Papa." "Clara," Ellie knelt before her daughter. "Papa's gone. You know that." "I hate it here. I hate that man. I hate everything." Rose stood by the door, her jaw set. "Stop crying, Clara. You're not a baby." "I'm not crying." "You are. You're always crying." "Girls," Ellie gathered them both, one in each arm. "I know this is hard. I know it's scary and strange and nothing like what we had before. But we're together. That's what matters." "Why did you marry him?" Clara's voice broke. "You don't even know him." "Because he was the only one who said yes." The truth hung in the air, ugly and honest. Ellie had sent 32 letters over 6 months. To farmers, shopkeepers, widowers, anyone who'd advertised for a wife. 31 had either ignored her entirely or rejected her once they learned about the children. Only Silas McAllister had written back. "Get some sleep." Ellie kissed each girl's forehead. "Tomorrow will be better." "How do you know?" "I don't, but I have to believe it anyway. That's what hope means." She helped them climb the ladder to the loft. The space was low but serviceable, with 2 pallets already laid out. Someone had prepared this. Someone had thought about 2 children needing somewhere to sleep. When she climbed back down, she noticed the table again. 2 chairs, but 4 plates on the shelf. Ellie looked at the covered cradle, then at the moccasins by the bed, then at the hairbrush still holding strands of dark hair. Who were you, she thought, and what did losing you do to him? She found him in the barn an hour later. He was sitting on a hay bale, his back against the wall, staring at nothing. The lamp beside him threw shadows across his face, deepening the scar, aging him by decades. "You should be inside." He didn't look up. "Getting cold." "I brought you supper." She held out a tin plate, salt pork, potatoes, bread she'd found in the larder. "You need to eat." "I'm not hungry." "When did you eat last?" He didn't answer. Ellie set the plate on the wooden crate beside him. "The arrangement, as you called it, goes both ways. I cook and clean, you stay alive long enough to benefit from it." A ghost of something crossed his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "You've got a mouth on you." "I've been told." She sat on the hay bale across from him. He tensed, like a wild animal that wasn't sure whether to fight or flee. "The woman in town," Ellie said. "Ida Harmon. She told me about your first wife." The walls went back up instantly, his jaw locked. His hands curled into fists. "She doesn't know anything about my wife." "Then tell me. Help me understand why I'm living in a dead woman's house, wearing her apron, cooking in her kitchen." "You don't need to understand." "I do, actually." Ellie leaned forward. "Those are my daughters up in that loft. They're scared and confused, and they need to know what kind of man they're living with. So do I." "You married me. Little late for questions." "I married a letter. I married a signature on a piece of paper sent by a man's sister. I didn't marry you. Not really." He flinched at that. Actually flinched, like she'd struck him. "Martha told you," he said quietly. "That she wrote the letters? That you didn't actually want a wife?" Ellie nodded. "She mentioned it in one of them. Said she was worried you'd die out here alone. Said you needed someone to pull you back from wherever you'd gone." Silas was quiet for a long time. The lamp flickered. Somewhere outside, a coyote called. "Winona," he said finally. "What?" "Her name. My wife. Winona." He said it like a prayer, or a wound. She was Salish. Her father was a fur trader who'd married into the tribe. She spoke English better than I did. Ellie waited. "We had a son, James, born in 72. His voice roughened. "He had her eyes, dark like river stones. Smartest boy you ever saw. Could count to 20 before he was 2. The cradle. The beautiful, empty cradle." "What happened?" Ellie asked softly. "Winter of 75. Sickness came through. Started with James, then Winona. His hands were shaking now. I put them both in the wagon, drove 30 miles through a blizzard to get to town, to get to the doctor." He stopped. "And?" "He wouldn't see them." Silas's voice went dead. "Took one look at Winona and closed the door. Said he didn't treat—" He stopped again, drew a breath. "Said he didn't treat savages, or their half-breed children." Ellie felt sick. Silas. I drove them back, 30 miles in the dark, with my wife dying beside me, and my son already cold in her arms. He looked at her then, and his eyes were drowning. I buried them under the cedar tree I'd planted when James was born, dug through frozen ground with my bare hands because the shovel couldn't break it. I'm so sorry. Don't. He stood abruptly, moving away from her. Don't be sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back. Sorry doesn't change anything. Then what does? He was silent. Why are you still here? Ellie stood too. Why stay in this cabin, surrounded by her things, torturing yourself with memories? Why not sell, move on, start somewhere fresh? Because they're here, his voice cracked. They're buried here. This is their land, their home. I can't. He pressed his fist against his chest, like he was trying to hold something in. I can't leave them alone. You're not living, Silas. You're just waiting to die. Maybe that's all I deserve. No. Ellie crossed the space between them. No, that's not true. You don't know what I know you kept that cradle clean for 3 years. I know you carved 4 chairs worth of plates even though you live alone. I know you prepared that loft for children you'd never met because your sister begged you to try. She stopped a foot away from him. You're not dead yet, Silas McAllister. You've just forgotten how to be alive. He stared at her. His breath came ragged. His hands trembled at his sides. Why did you come here? He asked. Really? Why did you marry a stranger 1,000 miles away? Because I had nothing left. Ellie's own voice caught. My husband died 2 years ago. Left me with debts I didn't know about and a reputation I couldn't escape. His family blamed me. The whole city blamed me. And no one, not one person, would give my daughters and me a chance. So I was your last choice. You were my only choice, the same way I'm yours. She reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed her hand on his arm. He went rigid. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe 2 people with nothing left can build something together. I can't love you. The words came out broken. I can't love anyone. Not after. I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for a chance. A real chance. Not this. She gestured at the barn, at the darkness, at the distance he kept between them. Not 2 strangers pretending they're not sharing a life. Silas looked at her hand on his arm. Looked at her face. Looked at something far away that she couldn't see. The barn's cold, he said finally. You should go inside. What about you? He hesitated. The longest hesitation she'd seen from him yet. I'll come in, he said quietly. Not to the bed, but I'll come in. Sleep by the stove. He swallowed. It's been 3 years since I slept under that roof. Then it's time. She walked out of the barn without looking back. She didn't need to. She could feel something shifting behind her. Something old and frozen, beginning, just barely, to crack. The girls were asleep when she climbed to the loft to check on them. Clara's face was tear-stained, even in rest. Rose had one arm thrown protectively over her sister. Ellie touched their hair, said a silent prayer, and climbed back down. The door opened. Silas stood on the threshold, silhouetted against the moonlight. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, looking at the room he'd avoided for 3 years. Come in, Ellie said softly. He stepped inside. The floor creaked under his weight. He walked slowly, touching nothing, seeing everything. His hand hovered over Winona's hairbrush, then withdrew. His gaze lingered on the moccasins, the clothes, the life preserved in amber. Finally, he reached the covered cradle. His hand shook as he pulled back the sheet. The wood gleamed in the lamplight, beautiful and empty. I built this for James, he said, so quiet she barely heard. 3 months it took. I wanted it perfect. Carved it from cedar because Winona said cedar keeps bad spirits away. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He only slept in it for a year. His voice broke. 1 year. Then he couldn't finish. Ellie moved to stand beside him. Not touching, not pushing, just present. Thank you, she said. For what? For coming inside. For trying. He looked at her, really looked, for the first time since she'd arrived. And in his eyes, beneath all the pain and the walls and the years of isolation, she saw something else. Fear. Hope. The terrifying possibility of feeling again. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Neither do I. But we'll figure it out. She left him standing by the cradle and went to bed. His wife's bed, covered in his wife's quilts, surrounded by his wife's ghost. But somewhere in the night, she heard him settle onto the floor by the stove, heard his breathing deepen into sleep. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that stagecoach, Ellie felt something other than despair. Not hope, not quite, but the possibility of it. Morning came gray and cold. Ellie woke to the sound of chopping wood. She pulled on her dress, braided her hair, and looked toward the stove. The blankets were folded. The floor was empty. But a fire was already burning. Coffee was steaming in a pot. And on the table sat 4 plates, not 2. 4 plates. For the first time in 3 years. Ellie stood in the middle of that haunted cabin, surrounded by loss and pain and the faintest whisper of something new, and allowed herself to believe. Maybe they would survive this. Maybe they would even live. She just didn't know that in 2 weeks, a rider would come with papers that would threaten everything. That a powerful man in town wanted Silas's land. That the battle ahead would test them in ways neither could imagine. She didn't know any of that yet. All she knew in this moment was that a broken man had taken his first step back into the world, and she intended to be there for every step that followed. The first week passed like walking through mud. Ellie learned the rhythms of mountain life, waking before dawn, starting fires, hauling water from the creek. Her hands blistered, her back ached, but she didn't complain. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. Silas kept his distance during the days. He worked the fences, tended the horses, chopped enough wood to last 3 winters. But every night he came inside, spread his blankets by the stove, slept under the same roof as his new family. It wasn't much, but it was something. The twins adjusted in their own ways. Clara cried herself to sleep most nights, muffling her sobs in her pillow so no one would hear. Rose watched Silas with suspicious eyes, studying him like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. On the 8th morning, everything changed. "Mama!" Rose's voice cut through the dawn quiet. "Come quick!" Ellie dropped the bread she'd been kneading and ran to the porch. Rose stood at the edge of the yard, pointing toward the barn. "What is it? What's wrong?" Look, Silas was in the corral with the horses. But he wasn't alone. Clara stood beside him, her small hand wrapped around the lead rope of a brown mare, her face transformed with something Ellie hadn't seen in months. Joy. "She's letting me hold her," Clara called out. "Mama, she's letting me hold her." Silas stood 2 feet away, his hands ready to intervene if needed. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had been dead since Ellie arrived, held the faintest spark of warmth. "Gentle," he said to Clara. "She's skittish around new folks, but she likes you." "What's her name?" "Bella." "That's pretty." Clara stroked the mare's nose. "Was she—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain. Was she your other wife's horse? Silas went still. Ellie held her breath. No, he said finally. Bella came after. She was wild when I found her. Took me a year to gentle her.
You gentled her yourself?
Some things just need patience, and someone willing to keep showing up. Clara looked at him, really looked, maybe for the first time. Can you teach me to ride her? The question hung in the air. Ellie watched Silas's jaw work, watched him fight against every instinct telling him to retreat. If your mama says it's all right, he said quietly. I reckon I could try. Clara turned to Ellie, her eyes bright. Mama, please? Yes. Ellie's voice came out thick. Yes, sweetheart. That would be wonderful. Rose appeared beside her. I want to learn too. Then you'll both learn, Silas said. He looked at Ellie over the girls' heads. Something passed between them. Not words, but understanding. A crack in the wall he'd built around himself. It was the first moment that felt like family. 2 days later, the rider came. Ellie was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats on the road. She shaded her eyes against the noon sun and watched a man approach, well-dressed, riding a horse too fine for this country, carrying himself with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Silas emerged from the barn, his body going rigid. Stay with the girls, he told Ellie. Who is that? Trouble. The rider dismounted near the porch. He was perhaps 50, with silver hair and a face that might have been handsome before cruelty carved lines into it. Silas, the man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Been a while. Not long enough, Cornelius. Cornelius. Ellie recognized the name. Martha had mentioned him once, the territorial judge who owned half of Elkhorn and wanted the other half. Now that's not very neighborly. Cornelius pulled papers from his saddlebag. I've come with an offer, a generous one. I told you before, the land's not for sale. That was before. Cornelius glanced toward the cabin, toward where Ellie stood frozen, with a wet shirt in her hands. Before you acquired responsibilities, a wife, children. His smile sharpened. Things can get complicated for a man with a family. Silas stepped forward. Get off my property. Just hear me out. The Consolidated Mining Company is prepared to offer $3,000 for your land. Cash. That's more money than you'd see in 10 years of ranching. I said no. Think about it, Silas. You could take your new bride somewhere civilized. Give those little girls a proper education. Start fresh. Cornelius lowered his voice. Leave all those painful memories behind. Ellie saw Silas's hands curl into fists, saw the rage building beneath his stone-cold surface. My wife and son are buried on this land. Silas's voice was barely controlled. You want me to sell their graves to a mining company? They're dead, Silas. They don't care. The punch came so fast, Ellie barely saw it. Cornelius hit the ground hard, blood streaming from his nose. Silas stood over him, chest heaving. Get up, Silas said. Get on your horse. And don't ever come back. Cornelius struggled to his feet, pressing a handkerchief to his face. But he was still smiling, still confident. You'll regret this, he said. I tried to do this the easy way. Remember that when everything falls apart. He mounted his horse and rode off, leaving dust and dread in his wake. Ellie ran to Silas. What does he mean? What's he going to do? I don't know. Silas watched the rider disappear down the road. But it won't be good. The summons arrived 3 days later. A deputy from Elkhorn brought it, a young man who couldn't meet Silas's eyes as he handed over the papers. "I'm sorry, Mr. McAllister. Judge's orders." Silas read in silence. His face went white.
"What is it?" Ellie demanded. "What does it say?"
He handed her the papers without a word. Ellie read them twice before the meaning sank in.
"He's challenging your claim to the land," she breathed, "saying you abandoned it for 3 years, that you're mentally unfit to manage property."
"That's not all." Silas pointed to the second page. "He's also claiming our marriage is invalid. Says I wasn't in sound mind when I agreed to it."
"That's insane."
"That's Cornelius Whitmore." Silas crumpled the papers in his fist. "He's been wanting this land for years. There's silver in these hills. He knows it. I know it. And now he's found a way to take everything."
"He can't do this. There must be laws."
"He is the law, the only judge within 100 miles. Silas threw the papers into the fire. "The hearing's in 2 weeks, and he's already decided how it ends." Ellie watched the flames consume the summons, watched Silas's hope burn with it.
"No,"
she said. He looked at her.
"No,"
she repeated.
"We're not giving up. Not without a fight."
"Ellie."
"I didn't come 1,000 miles to lose everything to some corrupt judge. There has to be another way."
"There isn't."
"There's always another way."
She grabbed his arm.
"You told me your wife was Salish. Her father, is he still alive?"
"Running Elk. He lives north of here with his people."
"Could he help? Could he testify that this land has cultural significance? That your family's graves are sacred ground?"
Silas stared at her. "How do you know about things like that?"
"My husband was a businessman. I learned how men fight with papers and laws. I also learned how to fight back."
She gripped his arm tighter. "If we can prove this land is more than just property, if we can make this about something bigger than mining rights, maybe we can win." "You really think that'll work?" "I think it's better than giving up." For a long moment, Silas didn't move. Then something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been hope. "Running Elk never blamed me," he said slowly, "for what happened to Winona. He said I did everything I could." "Then let's ask him to help us do everything we can now." Silas looked at her, at this woman who'd arrived as a stranger and was now standing beside him, fighting for a future he'd stopped believing in. "You're something else, Eleanor Brennan." "It's Eleanor McAllister now." She almost smiled. "And don't you forget it." They left at dawn the next morning. Martha came to stay with the twins. Her own children were grown, and she'd insisted the moment she heard about the summons.
"You go," she told Silas, hugging him fiercely. "You fight for what's yours. I'll keep these girls safe."
Clara clung to Ellie's waist.
"Don't go, Mama. Please don't go." "I have to, sweetheart. But I'll be back. I promise." "What if something happens?"
Ellie knelt to look her daughter in the eyes.
"Then Aunt Martha will take care of you. But nothing's going to happen. Your papa and I are going to fix this."
Clara's eyes went wide.
"You called him Papa?"
Ellie hadn't realized she'd said it. She looked up at Silas, who stood frozen by the horses.
"I did," she said softly. "Is that all right?"
Silas's throat worked. He nodded once, sharp and quick, then turned away. But not before Ellie saw the shine in his eyes. Rose hugged her next, brief, fierce.
"Beat the bad man, Mama."
"I intend to." They rode out as the sun broke over the mountains. 2 days' journey to Running Elk's camp. 2 days of silence and stars, and something building between them that neither dared name. On the first night, they made camp beside a stream. Silas built a fire while Ellie prepared a simple meal: dried meat, hard bread, coffee. They ate in silence, the flames crackling between them. "Tell me about her," Ellie said finally. Silas looked up. "Who?" "Winona. What was she like?" He set down his cup, stared into the fire for so long Ellie thought he wouldn't answer. "She was brave," he said. "Braver than me. When I first came to these mountains, I was running from the war, from the things I'd seen, the things I'd done." He paused. "She found me half dead in a snowstorm, dragged me to her father's camp, nursed me back to health, even though her people had every reason to let me die." "Why did she save you?" "I asked her that once. She said the spirits told her I had a good heart, that I just needed someone to remind me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She was always seeing things other people couldn't." "You loved her?" "More than I knew how to say." He looked at Ellie. "That scares you?" "No," she shook her head. "It gives me hope." "Hope?" "That you're capable of loving that deeply. That maybe, someday, you could feel something like that again." Silas was quiet for a long time. "I already do," he said. Ellie's heart stopped. "What?" "Feel something." He stood abruptly, moving toward the horses. "It scares the hell out of me, but it's there. Has been since you told me I was waiting to die and needed to start living instead." "Silas." "Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't say anything. I'm not ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I wanted you to know." He looked back at her, his face half lit by firelight. "Whatever happens with the hearing, whatever comes next, you should know that you matter. You and those girls. More than I thought anything could matter again." He walked into the darkness to check the horses. Ellie sat by the fire, her heart pounding, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise. But it was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to her. And it was enough. Running Elk's camp appeared on the second afternoon. Teepees dotted a valley beside a wide river. Children played near the water. Women worked over fires. Men sat in circles, talking, mending tools. Silas dismounted slowly. Ellie saw his hands trembling. "Are you all right?" "I haven't been here since the funeral." His voice was rough. "Since I brought their bodies back." A man emerged from the largest teepee. He was perhaps 70, with silver hair braided down his back, and eyes that had seen more than most men could imagine. "Son!" Running Elk walked toward them. "You've come home." Silas's composure cracked. He strode forward and embraced the old man, holding on like a drowning man grasping a rope. "I'm sorry," Silas choked out. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long." "Grief is a long road," Running Elk pulled back, studying his face. "But you're not walking it alone anymore." His eyes moved to Ellie. "You've brought a woman." "My wife." Silas wiped his face. "Ellie. Eleanor." Running Elk approached her. His gaze was penetrating, but not unkind. "You have strength," he said. "I can see it in your spirit. My daughter would have liked you." "I wish I could have known her." "You will know her, through her son." Running Elk looked back at Silas. "Through the man she helped him become." Ellie felt tears threatening. "We need your help. There's a man trying to take Silas's land. The land where Winona and James are buried." Running Elk's expression hardened. "Tell me everything." They talked through the night. Ellie explained the legal situation, the corrupt judge, the mining company, the hearing that was rigged against them. Running Elk listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. "The white man's law is a river that flows where power directs it," he said finally. But even rivers can be turned.
How?
You must make noise. Running Elk leaned forward. Not in their courtrooms, where the judge controls everything. In their newspapers, their churches. Show them what they're truly doing, desecrating the graves of a mother and child to dig for silver. His eyes glittered. White people care very much about how they appear to other white people. Use that.
You'd help us? After everything your people have suffered?
My daughter chose Silas. She saw something in him worth loving. Her bones rest in his valley, beside his son. Running Elk placed a hand on Silas's shoulder. This is not just your fight. It's ours. Silas bowed his head. Thank you. I don't deserve... You deserve nothing. That's why we give it freely. Running Elk stood. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we ride to the valley. We will perform ceremonies, mark the graves properly, document everything in your way. We will make so much noise that even the deaf will hear. The ceremonies began at dawn. Running Elk had brought 10 of his people, elders, spiritual leaders, witnesses. They gathered at the graves beneath the cedar tree, singing songs in Salish that Silas remembered from his wedding day. Ellie stood beside her husband, watching him weep openly for the first time. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry I left you alone." You did not leave them. Running Elk placed sacred markers around the graves. You carried them with you, every day, every breath. That is not abandonment. That is love. One of Running Elk's sons had learned photography from a missionary. He documented everything, the ceremonies, the grave markers, the valley itself. This will go to newspapers in Helena, Butte, Denver, Running Elk said. The white man loves pictures. Let them see what the mining company wants to destroy. By the third day, everything was ready. Running Elk embraced them both before they left. Fight hard, he told Ellie. My granddaughter's spirit watches over you. I won't let you down. You already haven't. He pressed something into her palm, a beaded bracelet, delicate and beautiful. Winona made this when she was young. She would want you to have it. Ellie couldn't speak. She clutched the bracelet to her heart and nodded through her tears. The ride home was different. Something had shifted between them. Some barrier fallen, some bridge built. Silas rode closer to her now, spoke more freely, even smiled once when she made a joke about his horse's stubbornness. On the last night before reaching the cabin, they sat by the fire again. I need to tell you something, Ellie said. Silas looked at her. My husband, Frederick, he wasn't a good man. She stared into the flames. He was charming when we married, but he had debts, secrets, women. She swallowed. When he died, I discovered he'd gambled away everything, the house, the savings, even my jewelry. His family blamed me, said I should have controlled him better. That's not fair. No, but it's why I came here, why I married a stranger from a newspaper advertisement. She looked at him. I wanted you to know that I understand what it's like to carry shame, to feel like your past defines you. Silas moved closer, close enough that their shoulders touched. You're not defined by his choices, he said. Just like I'm not defined by what I couldn't prevent. Do you believe that? I'm trying to. He took her hand, the first time he'd reached for her. Maybe we can believe it together. Ellie leaned against him, felt his arm come around her shoulders, felt the warmth of him, solid and real and present. They stayed like that until the fire burned low. The cabin appeared the next afternoon. Clara and Rose came running before they'd even dismounted. Mama! Papa! Clara threw herself at Silas's legs.
You came back!
Silas lifted her up, held her close. Course I did. Told you I would. Rose grabbed Ellie's hand.
Aunt Martha let us bake cookies. I saved you one.
That's my girl. Martha stood on the porch, her face tight with worry. When Ellie reached her, she pulled her aside.
There's news, Martha whispered. A man came while you were gone. Said the hearing's been moved up. It's in 5 days, not 2 weeks.
Ellie's stomach dropped.
5 days? Whitmore knows you went to the Salish. He's trying to finish this before you can fight back.
5 days. To prepare a case. To get the photographs developed and sent to newspapers. To find a lawyer willing to stand against the most powerful man in the territory. It was impossible. Ellie looked at Silas, who was swinging Clara in circles while Rose laughed, looked at the cabin that had become her home, looked at the mountains that held graves she'd sworn to protect.
Then we'll be ready in 5 days, she said.
Ellie,
we didn't come this far to lose now.
She straightened her shoulders.
Whitmore wants a fight? He's going to get one.
Martha studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Lord help that man, she said. He has no idea what's coming. That night, after the girls were asleep, Silas found Ellie standing by the window. What are you thinking? He asked.
That we're going to win.
How can you be so sure? She turned to face him.
Because we have to. Because your son deserves to rest in peace. Because your wife deserves to be honored, not bulldozed over for silver. She stepped closer. Because those girls upstairs have finally started calling you Papa, and I won't let anyone take that away from them.
Silas reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Whatever happens, he said softly, I'm glad you came. Glad you didn't run when you saw what you were getting into.
I don't run anymore.
Neither do I. He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers. Not from this. Not from you. They stood there in the darkness, breathing the same air, building courage for the battle ahead. The hearing was in 5 days, and Eleanor McAllister intended to win. The next 5 days blurred into chaos. Ellie barely slept. She wrote letters until her hand cramped, then wrote more. To newspapers in Helena, to church leaders in Butte, to anyone who might listen, might care, might help them fight the most powerful man in Montana territory. Silas rode to town twice, returning with supplies and grim news. Whitmore's been talking, he said on the 3rd night. Telling folks I've lost my mind, that I married some gold-digging widow who's after my land.
Let him talk.
People believe him, Ellie.
Then we'll make them believe us instead.
Running Elk's photographs arrived by courier on the 4th day. Ellie spread them across the table, studying each one. The graves marked with sacred symbols. The elders performing ceremonies. The valley itself, peaceful and untouched.
These are powerful, she murmured. Will they be enough?
They have to be. Clara appeared at her elbow.
Mama, what are those pictures?
Ellie hesitated. She'd tried to shield the girls from the worst of it, but they weren't fools. They'd heard the whispers, seen the worry on their parents' faces. These are pictures of something important, Ellie said carefully. Something we're trying to protect.
The graves?
Clara's voice was small.
Papa's other family?
Silas knelt beside his daughter. When had he started thinking of her as his daughter? Somewhere between the riding lessons and the bedtime stories, the line had blurred and then disappeared entirely. Yes, he said. My first wife and son. They're buried in our valley, under the big cedar tree.
The one you showed us?
That's the one. Clara was quiet for a moment.
Are bad people trying to hurt them?
They're trying to take the land where they rest. We won't let that happen."
Good.
Clara's jaw set with a determination that reminded Silas painfully of Winona.
Nobody should hurt people's families, even if they're already in heaven.
Silas pulled her into a hug, pressing his face against her hair so she wouldn't see his tears. Rose watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Then she crossed the room and wrapped her arms around them both.
"We're your family now, too," she said quietly. "All of us, together."
Silas couldn't speak. He just held them tighter. The night before the hearing, Ellie found Silas standing by the cedar tree. She'd woken to find his side of the bed empty. Yes, his side now. Somewhere in the past week, he'd moved from the floor to beside her. No discussion, no fanfare, just a natural progression that felt inevitable. He didn't turn when she approached. "I used to talk to them," he said. "Every day for that first year. Told them about the weather, the horses, what I'd eaten for supper." He paused. Then I stopped. Couldn't bear the silence anymore. Ellie stood beside him. The moon was full, casting silver light across the valley. "Talk to them now," she said. "What?" "Tell them what's happening. Introduce me." Silas stared at her. "You don't think that's crazy?" "I think the people we love don't stop existing just because we can't see them anymore." She took his hand. "I think Winona would want to know you're happy, that you found someone, that her son's grave will be protected." Silas turned back to the graves. His voice came out rough, broken. "Winona, it's me." He swallowed hard. "I know it's been a while. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things." He gripped Ellie's hand tighter. "But I wanted you to meet someone. Her name's Eleanor. She's something else entirely. Stubborn as a mule. Brave as anyone I've ever known. She's got 2 girls, Clara and Rose. You'd love them. They're smart and fierce, and they've started calling me Papa." His voice cracked. "I never thought I'd hear that word again. Never thought I'd want to. But I do. I want it. I want all of it." He wiped his face roughly. "We're fighting for you tomorrow, for you and James. We won't let them win. I promise." Ellie stepped closer. "I promise too. Your family will be protected. Always." The wind stirred the cedar branches. Just the wind. But Silas could have sworn he felt something else. A warmth. A presence. An acknowledgement from somewhere beyond. "Thank you," he whispered. To Winona. To Ellie. To whatever force had brought them all together. "Let's go to bed," Ellie said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be hard." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and for the first time in years, Silas felt ready to face whatever came next. The morning of the hearing dawned hot and still. Martha arrived early to stay with the twins. She hugged Silas fiercely at the door. "You give that snake Whitmore hell," she said. "For Winona. For all of us." "I intend to." Clara and Rose clung to their parents. Rose tried to be brave. Clara didn't bother pretending. "Come back," Clara begged. "Promise you'll come back." "We promise," Ellie said. "No matter what happens in that courtroom, we're coming home to you." "Both of us," Silas added. "Together." They rode toward Elkhorn as the sun climbed higher. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. Everything depended on what happened in the next few hours. The town was busier than Ellie had ever seen it. Word had spread about the hearing, and people had come from miles around to watch. Some out of curiosity, some out of malice. A few, maybe, out of genuine interest in justice. The courthouse was a 2-story building at the center of town. Whitmore's courthouse. Whitmore's rules. Whitmore's game. But they weren't playing by his rules anymore. A crowd had gathered outside. Ellie spotted Running Elk immediately. He'd come with 3 of his elders, all dressed in traditional regalia. Their presence sent murmurs rippling through the crowd.
"What are they doing here?" someone whispered. "Savages in a courtroom. Whitmore won't stand for it. Look at that woman with McAllister. She actually brought Indians."
Ellie held her head high and walked straight toward Running Elk.
"You came," she said.
"We said we would." Running Elk clasped Silas's arm. "Your fight is our fight. My daughter's bones call for justice."
"They might not let you speak."
"Then we will speak without words. Our presence alone tells a story." Running Elk gestured to his elders. "The newspapers are watching. Let them see who stands with you." Ellie looked around and realized he was right. 2 men with notepads lingered near the courthouse steps. A photographer set up his equipment across the street. Running Elk had done more than bring witnesses. He'd brought spectacle.
"You're brilliant,"
she breathed. "I am old. Old men learn to fight with cunning when strength fails." He smiled. "Now go. Make noise." The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. The air was thick with heat and tension and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Cornelius Whitmore sat at the judge's bench, resplendent in his black robes, surveying his domain with barely concealed satisfaction. To his right sat a lawyer from the mining company, a thin man with spectacles and an expression like a fox watching chickens. Silas and Ellie took their seats at the defendant's table. They had no lawyer, couldn't afford one, couldn't find one willing to stand against Whitmore. It didn't matter. Ellie had studied enough legal documents in Frederick's office to know how this game was played. She would represent them herself. Whitmore banged his gavel. The room fell silent. "This hearing will now come to order." His voice was smooth, confident. "We are here to address the matter of property claim number 847, the McAllister homestead. The petitioner, Consolidated Mining Company, represented by Mr. Harold Foster, has filed a challenge to the defendant's ownership on grounds of abandonment and mental incapacity." "Objection," Ellie stood. "I'd like it noted for the record that Judge Whitmore has a personal financial interest in the petitioner's success, making his impartiality questionable." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whitmore's face went red. "Mrs. McAllister, you will sit down." "I will not. Montana territorial law requires judges to recuse themselves from cases where they have direct financial stakes. Your partnership with Consolidated Mining is a matter of public record." "That is a baseless accusation." "Then you won't mind if I submit these documents?" Ellie held up a stack of papers. "Stock certificates, signed contracts, letters discussing profit sharing." She turned to face the crowd. "Judge Whitmore owns 15% of the company that's trying to take my husband's land." The room exploded. Shouts, arguments. The newspapermen scribbled furiously. Whitmore banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order. "This is irrelevant," he snarled. "The hearing will proceed." "Under protest," Ellie said clearly. "Every word of this proceeding is tainted by your corruption." "Sit down, Mrs. McAllister, or I will have you removed." Ellie sat. But she'd done what she needed to do. The seed of doubt was planted. The newspapers had their story. The mining company's lawyer presented his case with practiced ease. Silas McAllister had abandoned his property for 3 years, he argued. He'd lived like a hermit, refusing contact with civilization. Multiple witnesses could attest to his erratic behavior. his violent outbursts, his apparent mental instability. One by one, townsfolk took the stand. Ida Harmon described Silas as dangerous, unpredictable. The general store owner claimed Silas had threatened him once. A farmer testified that Silas's land had gone to ruin during his years of isolation. Lies, half-truths, twisted versions of reality. Ellie watched Silas's hands clench on the table, watched him bite back responses. She'd warned him this would happen, warned him to stay calm no matter what they said. "Your witness," Whitmore said finally, that smug smile playing on his lips. Ellie stood. "I'd like to call Silas McAllister to the stand." Murmurs in the crowd. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "The defendant wishes to testify?" "He does." Silas walked to the witness chair. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes burned. Ellie approached him slowly. "Mr. McAllister, can you tell the court why you withdrew from society 3 years ago?" "My wife and son died." "How did they die?" "Sickness. Measles." His voice was steady, but she could see the effort it cost him. "I tried to get them help. Rode 30 miles through a blizzard to reach the doctor in Elkhorn." "And what happened when you reached the doctor?" Silas looked at Whitmore. He refused to treat them. "Why?" "Because my wife was Salish. He called her a savage, said he didn't treat Indians or their half-breed children." The courtroom went silent. Ellie let the words hang in the air. "What happened next?" "I rode back. 30 miles in the dark. My son died on the way. My wife died in my arms that night." Silas's voice broke. "I buried them with my bare hands because the ground was too frozen for a shovel." Ellie turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man didn't abandon his property. He stayed with his family's graves. He tended them, protected them, built his entire life around honoring their memory." "Objection," Foster called out. "This is emotional manipulation, not legal argument." "Overruled," Whitmore said, then caught himself. He'd meant to sustain. Everyone saw it. Ellie pressed on. "Mr. McAllister, what is buried on your property?" "My wife Winona, my son James." "And what does Consolidated Mining plan to do with that land?" "Dig it up, for silver." "They would desecrate your family's graves." "Yes." Ellie faced the crowd again. "Is this who we are? Is this the Montana we want to live in? A place where grieving men are called insane? Where sacred graves are bulldozed for profit? Where the powerful can take whatever they want from whoever they please?" "Mrs. McAllister," Whitmore interrupted, "you will confine yourself to legal arguments." "This is a legal argument, Your Honor. Montana Territory recognizes family burial grounds as protected sites. I have here documentation from the Salish Tribal Council confirming that Winona McAllister's grave holds cultural and spiritual significance to her people." She held up Running Elk's papers. "I also have letters from 3 churches in Helena condemning any attempt to disturb these graves as a moral outrage." She walked toward the bench, her eyes locked on Whitmore's. "And I have signed affidavits from witnesses who saw you, Judge Whitmore, meeting privately with Consolidated Mining executives 2 weeks before this hearing was scheduled." Whitmore's face went white. "Where did you get those?" "From people who are tired of watching you steal from this community." Ellie's voice rose. "From people who remember what justice is supposed to look like." The courtroom erupted. People were on their feet, shouting, some in anger, some in support. The newspapermen were practically dancing with excitement. Whitmore banged his gavel until his arm must have ached. "Order! Order!" But there was no order. Not anymore. Running Elk rose from his seat in the gallery. The movement drew every eye. He walked toward the front of the courtroom with the dignity of a chief, his elders falling into step behind him. "I wish to speak," he said. Whitmore sputtered. "This is highly irregular. You have no standing here." "I have the standing of a father whose daughter was murdered by your prejudice." Running Elk's voice carried through the room. "I have the standing of a grandfather whose bones lie in that valley. I have the standing of a people who have watched you take and take and take for generations."
"Sir, you will sit down."
"I will not." Running Elk turned to address the crowd. "This man," he pointed at Whitmore, "speaks of law. But whose law? His law. The law that says my people are not human. The law that lets doctors refuse to save dying children. The law that turns sacred ground into profit." He stepped closer to the bench. Whitmore actually shrank back. "You want Silas McAllister's land because there is silver beneath it. But there is something more valuable than silver buried there. Love. Sacrifice. The memory of a woman who chose to bridge two worlds and paid for it with her life." Running Elk's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but everyone heard it. "If you take that land, you do not just steal from one man. You spit on the graves of everyone who ever loved differently than you approved. You declare that money matters more than memory, that power matters more than peace." He turned to face the crowd one final time. "Is that the world you want to leave your children?" Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, a woman began to clap. Others joined. First one, then 10, then the entire room. People were applauding, cheering, some with tears streaming down their faces. Whitmore hammered his gavel. "Order! I demand order!" But no one listened. "This hearing is adjourned." Whitmore's voice shook with rage. "I will render my decision tomorrow." "Render it now!" someone shouted. "We all know what's right." "This is my courtroom." "It's our town," another voice called, "and we're tired of you running it like your personal kingdom." Whitmore looked around the room. For the first time, Ellie saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of a man who'd finally pushed too far. "Tomorrow," he repeated. "My decision will be final." He fled through the back door. The crowd surrounded Silas and Ellie, shaking hands, offering congratulations, promising support. It was overwhelming, wonderful, terrifying. Because nothing was decided yet. Whitmore still had the power, still had the final word. Running Elk found them in the crush. "You did well," he said. "Both of you." "We don't know if it'll be enough," Silas replied. "It will be enough." The Spirit spoke through that room today. Even corrupt men cannot ignore the voice of truth forever. "What if he rules against us anyway?" Running Elk smiled. "Then we fight again, and again, and again, until justice prevails, or we join our ancestors." He gripped Silas's shoulder. "Your wife is proud of you today. I can feel her joy." Silas couldn't speak. He just nodded. Ellie took his hand. "Let's go home. The girls are waiting." They walked out of the courthouse together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. People lined the street, watching them pass. Some hostile, most not. Something had changed today. Something fundamental. Whether it would be enough remained to be seen. The ride home was quiet. Ellie leaned against Silas's shoulder, exhausted beyond words. He kept one arm around her, guiding the horses with the other. "You were incredible," he said finally. Standing up to Whitmore like that. I've never seen anything like it.
I was terrified.
Didn't show.
Good.
She closed her eyes.
Silas,
Yeah?
whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something.
What's that?
I love you.
The words hung in the air between them. Simple. True. Undeniable. Silas pulled the horses to a stop, turned to face her. Say that again.
I love you, Silas McAllister. Not because you gave me a home or saved me from poverty, because you're brave and kind and broken and beautiful, and you let me see all of it.
He kissed her then, really kissed her, for the first time, deep and desperate and full of everything they'd both been afraid to feel. When they finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers.
I love you too, he whispered.
God help me. I love you too. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Ellie laughed, a sound that startled them both. What? Silas asked. We're supposed to be worried about losing everything, and instead, we're declaring love in the middle of the road. Seems about right. He smiled, really smiled, and it transformed his face. I never did things the normal way. Neither did I. They rode the rest of the way home with their hearts full, and their futures uncertain, and their love, somehow, more certain than anything else. The girls were asleep when they arrived. Martha waited on the porch, her face tight with anxiety. Well? We don't know yet, Ellie admitted. The judge postponed his decision until tomorrow. But it went well? It went differently than Whitmore expected. Silas helped Ellie down from the wagon. People listened, really listened. Whether that changes anything. It'll change everything, Martha hugged them both. I heard about Running Elk's speech. Half the town is talking about it already. How did you hear? Word travels fast when something important happens. She squeezed Ellie's hands. You did good today, both of you. Now get some rest. Tomorrow will come whether you're ready or not. She rode off into the night, leaving them alone with their sleeping children and their uncertain future. Silas checked on the twins while Ellie undressed by lamplight. Clara had kicked off her covers. Rose had stolen. He adjusted the blankets gently, watching their peaceful faces. His daughters now. Really and truly his.
They're beautiful, Ellie said from below. They're perfect.
He climbed down the ladder. How'd we get so lucky?
I don't think luck had anything to do with it.
He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. Whatever happens tomorrow.
Don't.
Ellie.
Don't say it.
She pulled back, gripped his face in her hands.
We're going to win. We're going to keep this land, protect those graves, raise these children. I refuse to accept any other outcome.
You can't know that.
I can believe it, and sometimes that's the same thing.
He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Then I'll believe it too. They went to bed, holding each other close. Tomorrow would bring judgment. Tomorrow would bring consequences. But tonight, they had love. They had family. They had hope. And sometimes, that was enough to move mountains. The morning came too fast. Ellie woke to the sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving fast up the road toward the cabin. She sat bolt upright, her heart hammering.
Silas!
He was already awake, already reaching for his rifle. Stay here. Keep the girls inside.
Silas!
Promise me. She nodded. He kissed her hard and fast, then slipped out the door. Ellie climbed to the loft and shook the twins awake.
Mama?
Clara rubbed her eyes.
What's wrong? Shh, stay quiet. Don't come downstairs until I say.
Rose was already alert, her eyes sharp.
Is it the bad men? I don't know. Just stay here.
Ellie grabbed the shotgun from behind the door. She'd never fired one in her life, but she knew which end to point. That would have to be enough. Through the window, she watched Silas approach the riders. 5 men. No, 6. And leading them, her blood went cold. Cornelius Whitmore. "McAllister," Whitmore's voice carried across the yard. "I've come to deliver my ruling personally." Silas kept his rifle raised. "You could have sent a deputy." "I could have, but I wanted to see your face when you heard." Ellie's hands tightened on the shotgun. Behind her, she heard the twins whimpering in the loft. "Say your piece and get off my land," Silas growled. Whitmore smiled. That cold, cruel smile that made Ellie's skin crawl. "The court finds in favor of Consolidated Mining Company. Your claim to this land is hereby revoked due to abandonment and mental incapacity. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." The words hit like physical blows. Ellie felt the ground shift beneath her feet. No, this couldn't be happening. "You can't do this," Silas said. "I just did." Whitmore pulled papers from his coat. "Legal and binding. Signed by me, witnessed by these fine gentlemen." He gestured to the men behind him. "If you're not gone in 3 days, the sheriff will remove you by force." "This is my land. My family is buried here." "Not anymore." Whitmore's smile widened. "The mining company has graciously agreed to relocate any remains to a proper cemetery, though I can't promise they'll be gentle about it." Something snapped in Silas. He raised his rifle to his shoulder, finger on the trigger. "Silas, no!" Ellie burst through the door, shotgun forgotten. "Don't!" "He's going to dig up my son." "And if you shoot him, you'll hang, and then who protects them?" Silas's hands shook. His jaw clenched so tight the tendon stood out in his neck. Whitmore laughed. "Listen to your wife, McAllister. She's the only one here with any sense." "Get off my property." Silas's voice was barely human. "Now." "Gladly. I've delivered my message." Whitmore wheeled his horse around. 72 hours. Use them wisely." The riders thundered away, leaving dust and devastation in their wake. Silas stood frozen. The rifle slipped from his hands and clattered to the ground. Ellie ran to him. Silas, look at me." He didn't move, didn't blink. He was gone, retreated somewhere deep inside himself where the pain couldn't reach. "We're not giving up," she said fiercely. "Do you hear me? This isn't over." He won. He won one battle, not the war. "There's no war left to fight." Silas's voice was hollow. "It's done. It's all done." "Papa?" They both turned. Clara stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Rose was right behind her, pale but steady. "Are we losing our home?" Clara asked. Silas couldn't answer. He just stood there, broken in ways Ellie hadn't seen since the day she arrived. She knelt before the twins. "Listen to me," she said. "Both of you. This isn't over. That bad man thinks he's won, but he's wrong. We're going to fight." "How?" Rose demanded. "He's the judge. He makes the rules." "Then we'll find someone who makes bigger rules." Ellie stood, her mind racing. "The territorial governor, federal courts, newspapers that reach all the way to Washington." "That'll take months," Silas said dully. "We have 3 days. Then we use those 3 days to make sure everyone knows what's happening here." She grabbed his arms, forced him to look at her. "Silas McAllister, you did not survive 3 years of hell to give up now. Your wife and son are counting on you. I am counting on you. These girls are counting on you." Something flickered in his eyes, faint, but there. "What do you want me to do?" Ride to Running Elk. Tell him what's happened. We need witnesses, documentation, everything we can get." She turned to the girls. "You two are going to Aunt Martha's. Now." "We want to stay with you," Clara protested. "I know, sweetheart, but I need you safe so I can fight without worrying. Can you be brave for me?" Clara nodded, wiping her tears. "We can be brave. That's my girls." Silas finally moved. He pulled all three of them into his arms, holding tight. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm sorry I froze."
"I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," Ellie cut him off. "Be angry. Use that anger to keep fighting." He pulled back, and there it was, the fire returning to his eyes. "I'll ride for Running Elk." "Good. I'll take the girls to Martha, then head to town." "What are you going to do in town?" Ellie's jaw set. "Make noise." Martha took one look at Ellie's face and opened her arms. "I heard," she said. "Word travels fast when Whitmore wants to gloat." "Can you keep the girls?" "As long as you need." Martha gripped her hands. "What's the plan?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him win. Not without a fight that makes history." "That's the spirit." Martha hugged the twins tight. "You girls be good. Your mama's going to save the day." "What if she can't?" Clara whispered. Martha knelt before her. "Your mama faced down a corrupt judge in his own courtroom. She stood up when everyone else sat down. If anyone can do the impossible, it's her." Ellie kissed her daughters goodbye and rode for Elkhorn. The town was buzzing when she arrived. News of Whitmore's ruling had spread overnight. People gathered in clusters, whispering, arguing. Some looked at Ellie with pity, others with satisfaction, a few with something that might have been shame. She dismounted in front of the mercantile and walked straight inside. Ida Harmon was behind the counter. Her eyes widened. "Mrs. McAllister, I'm not sure you should be here." "I'm sure I should." Ellie planted her hands on the counter. "I need paper, lots of it, and ink." "What for?" "I'm writing to every newspaper in the territory, every church leader, every politician. By the time I'm done, Cornelius Whitmore's name will be synonymous with corruption from here to Washington." Ida's mouth opened and closed. That's quite ambitious." "It's necessary." A voice came from behind her. "I'd like to help." Ellie turned. A young woman stood near the fabric display, clutching a bolt of calico. She looked familiar. "I'm Sarah," the woman said. "Sarah Brennan, Reverend Pike's daughter. The reverend who testified for the mining company?" "He didn't want to." Sarah stepped closer. "Whitmore threatened him. Threatened our church's funding, our standing in the community. Papa's been sick about it ever since." "I'm sorry to hear that." "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because what's happening to your family is wrong." Sarah's jaw set. "Papa won't speak out. He's too scared. But I'm not." "What can you do?" "I can write. I've been corresponding with newspapers in Helena for months, submitting articles under a pen name. They published 3 of them." She met Ellie's eyes. "Let me help you tell your story." Ellie studied her for a long moment. Young, yes. Scared, probably. But determined. "Can you write fast?" "Faster than anyone in this town." "Then come with me." They wrote for hours. In the back room of the boarding house, away from prying eyes, Ellie dictated while Sarah wrote. The story of Silas and Winona, the death of their son, the corrupt judge, the sacred graves about to be desecrated. By afternoon, they had 15 letters ready to send. "This is remarkable," Sarah said, reading through the final draft. "No one's ever put it all together like this before." It needed to be said. Whitmore will destroy you if he finds out.
He's already trying to destroy us. At least this way, we fight back. A knock at the door made them both jump. Ellie opened it carefully. A man stood in the hallway, hat in hand. She recognized him from the hearing, one of the newspaper men who'd been taking notes. "Mrs. McAllister? I'm Thomas Reed, correspondent for the Helena Independent."
What do you want?
"To hear your side of the story. The real story." He held up his notepad. "What happened in that courtroom yesterday is the biggest scandal I've ever witnessed. But I need more details. I need proof." Ellie glanced at Sarah. Sarah nodded.
Come in, Mr. Reed, and close the door behind you.
The interview lasted 2 hours. Reed asked questions Ellie hadn't even thought to answer. About Whitmore's past dealings, about other families he'd cheated, about the mining company's record in other territories. "This is bigger than your land," Reed said finally. "Consolidated Mining has been pulling this same scheme across Montana, finding vulnerable properties, using corrupt officials to seize them, then extracting whatever's valuable and moving on."
How many families?
"At least a dozen that I know of. Most gave up, took whatever pittance was offered, and disappeared."
We're not disappearing.
"I can see that." Reed tucked his notepad away. "I'm going to publish this story, Mrs. McAllister. All of it. But I have to warn you, it might not be enough to save your land."
Why not?
"Because Whitmore's ruling is technically legal. Corrupt, yes. Unjust, absolutely. But legal. The only way to overturn it is through a higher court, and that takes time you don't have."
Then we'll buy time.
"How?" Ellie thought of Silas, riding through the mountains to find running elk. Thought of the graves under the cedar tree. Thought of everything they stood to lose.
I don't know yet, she admitted, but I'll figure it out.
Silas found Running Elk's camp as the sun began to set. The old man was waiting for him, as if he'd known Silas would come. "I heard," Running Elk said before Silas could speak. "The corrupt one has made his move." "He's going to dig them up," Silas's voice cracked. "Winona, James. He's going to tear them out of the ground like they're nothing." "He will try."
"What do I do? How do I stop him?"
Running Elk was quiet for a long moment. Then he gestured for Silas to sit beside him. "When I was young," he said, "the white men came to our lands with papers and promises. They said they wanted peace. They said they only needed a little. They lied."
"I know."
"We fought them, with weapons, with words, with everything we had. And we lost. Again and again." Running Elk's eyes grew distant. "But we are still here. Our people survive. Our stories continue. Why?"
"I don't know."
"Because we learned that some battles cannot be won with force. They must be won with patience, with truth, with time." He gripped Silas's arm. "The corrupt man has the law on his side today. But the law is not justice. Justice lives in the hearts of people. And hearts can be changed. I don't have time to change hearts. I have 3 days. Then make those 3 days count." Running Elk stood. "We will come to your valley, all of us. Every man, woman, and child who can make the journey. We will stand on that land, and we will not move. They'll arrest you, hurt you. Let them try." Running Elk's smile was fierce. "The newspapers are watching now, thanks to your wife's courage. Every blow they strike against us becomes a wound to their cause. You'd do that? For Winona? For Winona. For James. For you." Running Elk placed his hand over Silas's heart. "You are my son now, the husband my daughter chose. We do not abandon family." Silas couldn't speak. He just bowed his head and let the tears come. Ellie returned to the cabin at nightfall to find it empty. Her heart seized. Where was Silas? Had something happened? Then she heard voices outside. Multiple voices. She grabbed the shotgun and crept to the window. The yard was full of people. Not just Running Elk and his people, though they were there. At least 30 of them, setting up camp near the barn. But there were others, too. White folks from town. She recognized the blacksmith, the school teacher, 3 of the women from the church. And at the center of it all, Silas stood talking with a man in a suit she'd never seen before. She burst through the door. "What's happening? Who are all these people?" Silas turned. His face looked different, lighter, hopeful. "Ellie, this is James Thornton. He's a lawyer from Helena." "From Helena?" Thornton stepped forward and tipped his hat. "Ma'am, Mr. Reed from the Independent sent word about your situation. I've been looking for a case like yours for 3 years." "A case like mine? A case that can bring Whitmore down, permanently." Thornton's eyes gleamed. "He's made enemies across this territory, powerful enemies who've been waiting for the right moment to strike. Your story, Mrs. McAllister, is that moment." "But the ruling, it's legal." "Technically, yes, but I found something Whitmore didn't count on." Thornton pulled a document from his case. "This is a federal statute protecting indigenous burial sites on private land. It was passed last year, quietly, without much fanfare. I doubt Whitmore even knows it exists." Ellie's hands shook as she took the paper. "This would protect the graves?" "It would do more than that. It would invalidate Whitmore's ruling entirely. He based his decision on abandonment, but the law specifically states that maintaining a family burial ground constitutes continuous use of property." "So we win?" "We have a fighting chance, but we need to get this to a federal judge before Whitmore's deadline expires." Thornton's expression sobered. "The nearest federal court is in Helena. 3 days hard ride." "Then we ride." "It's not that simple. Whitmore will have men watching the roads. The moment you leave, he'll move up his timeline, claim you fled." "So what do we do?" Running Elk stepped forward. "We stay. We protect the land while you fight in their courts." "There are 30 of us," the blacksmith added. "More coming tomorrow. Whitmore's men won't get past us without a war." "A war that could get people killed," Ellie said. "Some things are worth dying for." The schoolteacher, a gray-haired woman named Agnes, met Ellie's eyes. "What's happening to your family happened to my brother's family 10 years ago. I've been waiting a long time for someone brave enough to fight back." Ellie looked at all of them. Running Elk's people in their traditional dress. Townsfolk who'd finally found their courage. Her husband, standing tall for the first time since they'd gotten the news. "We'll need to coordinate," she said. "Someone to stay here and organize the defense. Someone to ride with Thornton to Helena. Someone to keep the newspapers informed of everything that happens." "I'll stay," Silas said. "No, you need to come with me." "Ellie, you're the one with standing in federal court. Your name is on the property claim. Without you, Thornton has nothing." Silas looked toward the cedar tree, barely visible in the darkness. "I can't leave them." "You won't be leaving them. You'll be saving them." She took his hands. "Running Elk will protect the graves. The townsfolk will bear witness. We will win this case and come back to a home that can never be taken from us again." He was silent for a long moment. "The girls," he finally said. "They're at Martha's. They'll stay there until this is over. Martha will keep them safe." "And if we lose?" "We won't. But if we do?" Ellie cupped his face in her hands. "Then we'll have gone down fighting, together,
And our daughters will grow up knowing their parents never surrendered, never gave up, never let evil win without a battle. Silas closed his eyes. When he opened them, the fear was still there. But so was something else. Determination. "When do we leave?" "First light," Thornton said. "We'll take the back trails through the mountains. Longer route, but safer." "I'll have supplies ready," Running Elk offered. "And I'll have letters ready for every newspaper in the territory," Sarah added. Ellie hadn't even noticed her arrive. "By the time you reach Helena, the whole country will know what's happening here." Ellie looked around at all of them. A ragged army of misfits and outcasts, united against a common enemy. "Thank you," she said. "All of you." "Don't thank us yet," Agnes replied. "Thank us when it's over." That night, Ellie and Silas walked to the cedar tree one last time. The camp behind them hummed with activity, people preparing for siege, people preparing for hope. But here, under the branches that sheltered two small graves, there was only peace. "I never thought I'd have this again," Silas said quietly. "People willing to fight for me. A family worth fighting for." "You always deserved it." I didn't believe that. For 3 years I thought I deserved nothing but pain. He knelt beside the graves, touched the sacred markers Running Elk had placed. "Winona would have liked you." "You think so?" "I know so. You're both stubborn as mules and twice as brave." Ellie knelt beside him. "I promise you, both of you, we'll protect this place. We'll keep your memory alive. And we'll raise our daughters to know that love is worth fighting for, no matter the cost." The wind stirred the cedar branches. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. And for just a moment, Ellie could have sworn she heard a woman's voice, speaking words she didn't understand, but somehow felt in her bones. "Thank you. Take care of him." "I will," she whispered. "I promise." Silas looked at her. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Nothing. Just the wind." But his eyes told a different story. And when he took her hand to walk back to the cabin, his grip was stronger than it had ever been. The morning came gray and cold. Ellie kissed the twins goodbye one last time through Martha's window. Both girls were crying. "Come back, Mama," Clara begged. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise." "You too, Papa." Rose gripped Silas's hand through the glass. "You have to come back too." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." He pressed his palm against hers. "Be brave, little one. Be brave for all of us." They rode out as the sun broke through the clouds. 3 horses, 3 riders. Thornton leading, Silas and Ellie following close behind. Behind them, the valley filled with people who'd chosen to stand against injustice. Ahead of them, a 3-day journey through dangerous country, with no guarantee of success. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Ellie felt something she'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. Real, solid, unshakable hope. They were going to win. She could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the steady rhythm of her horse's hooves against the mountain trail. They were going to win, and Cornelius Whitmore would never hurt another family again. She looked at Silas riding beside her. He caught her eye and smiled. Not the broken ghost of a smile she'd seen when she first arrived. A real smile, full and warm and alive. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." He reached across the space between them and squeezed her hand. "Now let's go save our home." They rode into the mountains together, carrying the hopes of everyone who'd ever been crushed by the powerful.
And somewhere behind them, under a cedar tree in a valley that had seen too much sorrow, two spirits rested easy. Their graves would be protected, their love would be remembered, and their family, both old and new, would finally have the peace they deserved. The mountain trails were treacherous, 3 days of hard riding through territory that didn't forgive mistakes. Thornton pushed them relentlessly, stopping only when the horses couldn't go further. On the second night, they made camp in a narrow canyon. "We're being followed," Thornton said quietly. Ellie's blood went cold. "Whitmore's men?" "2 riders. They've been tracking us since yesterday morning." Silas checked his rifle. "I'll handle them." "No," Thornton shook his head. "If you kill them, Whitmore will use it against you. Say you're violent, unstable, everything he's been claiming." "Then what do we do?" "We outsmart them." Thornton pointed to a narrow pass ahead. "That trail splits 3 ways. We'll take the hardest route, straight up the ridge. They won't expect it." "The horses can't handle that climb." "Then we walk and lead them." Thornton met Silas's eyes. "Your wife is tougher than she looks. Trust her." Ellie grabbed her saddlebag. "I didn't come this far to be stopped by a steep hill." They climbed through the night. The trail was barely a trail at all, just rocks and roots and sheer drops that made Ellie's heart pound. But she kept moving, 1 foot in front of the other, Silas behind her, his hand on her back whenever she stumbled. By dawn, they'd lost their pursuers. "Helena's just over that ridge," Thornton said. "We'll be there by noon." Ellie's legs screamed with exhaustion. Her hands were raw from gripping rocks. But she smiled. "Then let's not waste time." Helena was bigger than Elkhorn by a factor of 10. Buildings rose 3 and 4 stories high. Streets teemed with people, carriages, commerce. The territorial capital buzzed with energy that felt almost overwhelming after months in the quiet valley. Thornton led them straight to the federal courthouse. "Judge Morrison presides here," he explained. "He's fair, honest, and he has no love for Whitmore." "Will he see us?" "He'll see us. The question is whether he'll act in time." The courthouse was an imposing stone building. They climbed the steps together, Ellie's heart pounding with every stride. A clerk met them in the lobby. "Mr. Thornton, you're expected." "Expected?" "Word arrived this morning, from Elkhorn." The clerk's face was grim. "There's been trouble." Ellie grabbed Silas's arm. "What kind of trouble?" "I don't have details, ma'am. Just that Judge Morrison wants to see you immediately." They followed the clerk through marble hallways that echoed with their footsteps. Every second felt like an hour. What had happened? Were the girls safe? Was Running Elk? The clerk opened a heavy oak door. "Judge Morrison will see you now." Judge Morrison was a barrel-chested man with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. He sat behind a massive desk covered in papers, studying them as they entered. "Mr. and Mrs. McAllister," he gestured to chairs. "Sit. We have much to discuss." "What's happened in Elkhorn?" Ellie demanded. "Whitmore moved early. Yesterday morning, he sent 30 men to your property with orders to clear it by force." Silas shot to his feet. "The people there are fine. Shaken, but fine." Morrison held up a hand. "Your wife's newspaper campaign worked better than you could have imagined. When Whitmore's men arrived, they found not just the Salish and local supporters, but 3 journalists from major papers and a photographer from the Associated Press." Ellie's breath caught. "They didn't attack?" "They tried. Then they realized every move was being documented." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. "Whitmore's deputy actually arrested one of the journalists for trespassing. The photograph of that arrest has already appeared in 4 newspapers." Thornton leaned forward. "What's the current situation?" Standoff. Neither side will budge. Morrison's expression sobered. But it can't last forever. Whitmore's claiming federal interference in local matters. He's demanding the territorial governor back him up. And will he? The governor's a politician. He'll back whoever seems likely to win. Morrison fixed his gaze on Silas. Which is why we need to win quickly and decisively. He pulled a document from his desk. This is the federal statute Mr. Thornton mentioned. Protection of indigenous burial sites on private land. He slid it across the desk. It's your best weapon, but it's not enough on its own. I need testimony. Documented proof that the graves on your land meet the legal definition of a protected site. Running Elk brought his elders, Silas said. They performed ceremonies, marked the graves. We have photographs.
Good. What else? Ellie spoke up. I have affidavits from church leaders, community members, even Whitmore's own victims. And I have documentation of his partnership with the mining company. Stock certificates, contracts, everything. Morrison's eyebrows rose. Where did you get those? People are tired of being afraid. When they saw someone willing to fight back, they started sharing what they knew. That's quite a collection. Morrison studied her with new respect. Mrs. McAllister, you may have just handed me enough to destroy Whitmore's career entirely. I don't care about his career. I care about my family's land. You'll get both. Morrison stood. We'll convene a special session this afternoon. I'll hear testimony, review evidence, and render a decision before sunset. That fast? Your people are facing armed men right now. We don't have the luxury of delay. He extended his hand to Silas. Mr. McAllister, I knew your first wife's people. Traded with them for years. They're good folks. They deserve better than what this territory has given them. Silas shook his hand. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over. The hearing began at 2 o'clock. Word had spread through Helena. The gallery was packed. Newspapermen lined the walls. Even the territorial governor had sent a representative to observe. Thornton presented their case with methodical precision. The land claim, properly filed and maintained. The graves, documented and protected under federal law. The corrupt relationship between Whitmore and Consolidated Mining. The pattern of abuse stretching back a decade. Witness after witness took the stand. Running Elk spoke of his daughter's life and death. His voice never wavered, but tears ran freely down his weathered cheeks. Agnes, the schoolteacher, testified about her brother's family, destroyed by Whitmore's schemes 10 years earlier. Sarah Brennan read letters from other victims, families scattered across the territory, all with the same story of corruption and loss. And then it was Ellie's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head high. Her hands were steady, though her heart raced. State your name for the record. Eleanor McAllister, formerly Eleanor Brennan. Mrs. McAllister, tell the court how you came to Montana. She told them everything. The debts her first husband left. The desperation that drove her west. The man she'd married without meeting, who turned out to be broken and beautiful and worth saving. I came here expecting nothing, she said. A roof over my head, food for my daughters, safety. That was all I asked for. And what did you find? A family, her voice caught. A real family, built from scratch by two people who had nothing left to lose. Mrs. McAllister, can you describe what's at stake if this court rules against you? Ellie looked at Silas, sitting in the gallery with his hands clenched. My husband's first wife and son are buried on that land. Sacred ground to her people. Sacred ground to us. She turned to face the gallery. Cornelius Whitmore wants to tear them from the earth so he can dig for silver. He calls it progress.
I call it desecration. Objection! A lawyer Ellie didn't recognize stood at the back of the room. The witness is editorializing. Overruled. Morrison's voice was firm. Continue, Mrs. McAllister. I'm not asking for charity. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for justice. She gripped the railing of the witness stand. My family has done everything right, filed proper claims, paid taxes, maintained the land, and still, a corrupt judge decided he could take it all because he had more power than we did. She pointed at the gallery, at the newspapermen scribbling notes. This isn't just about one family's land. It's about whether the law means anything at all, whether ordinary people can stand against the powerful, whether graves are sacred or just obstacles to profit. Her voice rose. Judge Morrison, I don't know much about federal law, but I know this. If you rule against us, you tell every corrupt official in this territory that they can do whatever they want, that the law is just a tool for the powerful to crush the weak. She met his eyes directly. I don't believe that's true, and I don't think you do either. The courtroom was silent. Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Your testimony is noted. You may step down. The final arguments lasted an hour. Thornton was brilliant, weaving law and emotion into an unassailable case. The mining company's lawyer tried to argue procedure, jurisdiction, technical points that made Ellie's head spin. But everyone could see which way the wind was blowing. At 5 o'clock, Morrison called for silence. I've heard the testimony, I've reviewed the evidence, and I've reached a decision. Ellie gripped Silas's hand so hard her knuckles went white. The federal statute protecting indigenous burial sites is clear and unambiguous. The graves of Winona and James McAllister meet every requirement for protection. Furthermore, the evidence of Judge Whitmore's corruption is overwhelming. Morrison's voice hardened. This court finds that Judge Whitmore's ruling is hereby vacated. The McAllister land claim is restored in full. Any attempt to disturb the graves will be treated as a federal crime. A roar went up from the gallery. People cheering, crying, embracing. Ellie turned to Silas. He was weeping openly, making no attempt to hide it. We won, she breathed. We won. He pulled her into his arms and held her like he'd never let go. But Morrison wasn't finished. He banged his gavel until the room quieted. There's one more matter to address. His eyes swept the gallery. The evidence presented today reveals a pattern of corruption spanning 10 years. Families destroyed, lives ruined, justice perverted for profit. He stood. I am issuing a warrant for the arrest of Judge Cornelius Whitmore on charges of corruption, abuse of power, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Federal marshals will take him into custody immediately. The room exploded again. Ellie saw the territorial governor's representative slip out a side door, presumably to report the news. Thornton gripped Silas's shoulder. It's over. Really over. Thank you. Silas's voice was rough. I don't know how to. You don't have to thank me. This is what the law is supposed to do. Protect people. Thornton smiled. Now go home. Your family's waiting. The ride back to Elkhorn was the longest of Ellie's life. Not because of the distance, because of the anticipation, the need to see their daughters, to tell running elk, to stand on their land and know, truly know, that it was safe. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses. On the morning of the second day, they crested the ridge above the valley and stopped. The camp was still there, but it had grown. Dozens of tents now dotted the meadow. People moved among them, cooking, talking. laughing. And flying from a pole near the cabin, 2 flags. The American flag, and something else. Something Ellie didn't recognize. "That's Salish," Silas said quietly. "The symbol of Winona's band." They rode down into the valley together. Running Elk was the first to reach them. His face, when he saw their expressions, broke into the widest smile Ellie had ever seen. "You won." "We won." Silas dismounted and embraced him. "It's over, Father. The land is ours. Forever." Running Elk wept. He made no attempt to hide it. "My daughter rests easy now. Her spirit is at peace." People surrounded them. Townsfolk who'd stood guard. Salish warriors who'd refused to leave. Journalists who'd witnessed everything and couldn't wait to write about it. But Ellie only had eyes for one thing. 2 small figures running toward her across the meadow. "Mama! Papa!" She dropped from her horse and caught Clara in her arms. Rose hit her a second later, nearly knocking her over. "You came back! You promised, and you came back!" "Of course we did." Ellie held them tight, tears streaming down her face. "We'll always come back. Always." Silas wrapped his arms around all 3 of them. His family. His real, true, complete family. "Is it over?" Clara asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "It's over, sweetheart. We won." "We get to stay?" "We get to stay. This is our home. Forever." Rose pulled back, her eyes fierce even through tears. "And the bad man?" "The bad man is going to jail." Silas cupped her face in his hands. "He'll never hurt anyone again." Martha pushed through the crowd, her own eyes wet. "I told you," she said, pulling Ellie into a crushing hug. "I told you she'd save the day." "We did it together," Ellie said. "All of us." "Damn right we did." Martha stepped back, laughing. "Now come on. There's food cooking and stories to tell, and a whole camp full of people who want to celebrate." The celebration lasted 3 days. People came from miles around. Word had spread about the victory, about Whitmore's arrest, about the federal ruling that would protect indigenous burial sites across the territory. Running Elk's people performed traditional ceremonies at the graves. Ellie watched Silas stand with them, singing songs in Salish that he'd learned during his marriage to Winona. Clara and Rose watched with wide eyes. "What are they saying?" Rose asked. "They're thanking the spirits," Silas explained, "for protecting this place, for bringing justice. Can we learn the songs too? If you want." "We want." Clara gripped his hand. "Winona was your family. That makes her our family too." Silas had to turn away to hide his tears. That night, after the girls were asleep, Ellie found him standing under the cedar tree. She slipped her hand into his. "What are you thinking?" "That I don't deserve this." His voice was quiet. "Any of it. After everything I did wrong, everything I failed at. How did I end up here?" "You didn't do anything wrong, Silas. You survived. And survival isn't a sin." "I left them alone for 3 years." "You're not alone anymore. They're not alone anymore." She turned his face toward hers. "Look around. Running Elk's people are camped in our valley. Our daughters are sleeping in our cabin. We have friends, family, a community that stood with us when everything seemed lost." She pressed her hand against his chest. "Winona would be proud of you. I'm proud of you. I love you." The words came out fierce, almost desperate. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," she smiled. "Now stop being terrified and kiss your wife." He did. 6 months later, Helena's newspapers reported that Cornelius Whitmore had been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Consolidated Mining collapsed, its assets seized to compensate the families it had defrauded. The federal statute protecting indigenous burial sites was strengthened, with Ellie's testimony cited as a key influence. And in a small valley in Montana Territory, a family grew. Ellie discovered she was pregnant in the spring. The news hit Silas like a thunderbolt. "Are you sure?" "Very sure." He sank to his knees, pressed his face against her belly. "A baby. Our baby. Our baby. I thought, after James, I never imagined." "I know." She stroked his hair. "But life surprises us. That's what makes it worth living." The baby arrived in December, a boy with Silas's gray eyes and Ellie's stubborn chin. They named him William Running Elk McAllister. "William for my grandfather," Ellie explained to the twins, who were utterly enchanted by their new brother. "Running Elk for the man who stood with us when everyone else turned away." Running Elk himself held the baby at the naming ceremony. His old eyes shone with tears. "My grandson," he said, "the bridge between two worlds." "Grandpa," Clara tugged at his sleeve, "will you teach us more Salish songs?" "As many as you want, little one. As many as you want." The years passed. Clara and Rose grew into young women, fierce and smart, and deeply rooted in the land their parents had fought so hard to keep. William grew too, learning to ride almost before he could walk, absorbing stories from both sides of his heritage. The cabin expanded, more rooms added as the family grew. More hands to work the land, more voices to fill the silence that had once nearly destroyed Silas. Running Elk passed in his sleep when William was 7. They buried him beside Winona and James, under the cedar tree that now sheltered 3 generations. "He's with his daughter now," Silas said at the funeral. "He's finally home." On a summer evening 15 years after Ellie had stepped off that stagecoach in Elkhorn, she sat on the porch of the cabin she'd made her own. Silas sat beside her, his hair more gray than brown now, his face lined with years of sun and wind and laughter. Clara was teaching her children to ride in the corral. Rose had gone to Helena to study law, determined to fight for other families the way Thornton had fought for theirs. William was at the creek, fishing with the same patience his father had taught him. "Do you ever regret it?" Silas asked quietly. "Regret what?" "Coming here, marrying a stranger, taking on all of this." Ellie turned to look at him. This man who'd been so broken when she met him. This man who'd learned to love again, to live again, to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. "Not for a single moment." She took his hand. "You gave me everything, Silas. A home, a family, a purpose, a love I never knew was possible." "You gave me more," his voice roughened. "You gave me back my life. You looked at a man everyone called cursed and saw something worth saving." "Because you were worth saving. You always were." He leaned over and kissed her, soft, tender, full of 15 years of shared joy and sorrow and growth. From the corral, Clara's voice rang out. "Grandma! Grandpa! Watch this!" Her youngest daughter, just 4 years old, sat proudly on a pony, beaming with triumph. "We're watching," Ellie called back. Silas laughed, a sound she never tired of hearing, a sound that had taken years to unlock. "She's going to be a terror on horseback." "Like her grandmother." "You couldn't ride when you got here." "I learned," she smiled. "We all learned." Behind them, the cabin stood solid and warm, filled with memories and photographs, and the beautiful cedar cradle that had now rocked 4 babies to sleep. Under the cedar tree, 4 graves rested in peace. Winona, James,
running Ellie.
And a small marker for Frederick, Ellie's first husband, whose death had set everything in motion. Not enemies, not forgotten, just part of the story that had led them all here. "I have something for you," Silas said. He pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. "I've been working on it for months." Ellie opened it carefully. Inside lay a ring, simple silver band with 2 stones set side by side, one blue, one green. "The blue is for Winona's birthstone," Silas explained. "The green is for yours. I wanted something that honored both of you, both halves of my heart." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "Silas, you never asked me to forget her, never asked me to choose. You just loved me, all of me, including the parts that still belonged to someone else." He took the ring, slid it onto her finger. "This is my promise that I'll love all of you too, every part, forever." She threw her arms around him, holding tight. "I love you, Silas McAllister." "I love you too, Eleanor McAllister. More than words can say." They sat together on the porch as the sun set, surrounded by the sounds of family, of laughter, of life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. The valley that had once held so much sorrow now overflowed with joy. The man that everyone had called cursed had become the most blessed. And the woman who'd arrived with nothing but 2 children and desperate hope had found everything she'd ever wanted. Not because fate had been kind, not because luck had intervened, because they'd fought, together, against impossible odds, against powerful enemies, against their own fears and doubts. They'd fought, and they'd won. Not just the land, not just the legal battle. They'd won something far more precious. A life, a legacy, a love that would echo through generations. And that was worth more than all the silver in Montana. Under the cedar tree, the spirits of those who'd come before rested easy. In the cabin, a family laughed and loved and lived. And on the porch, 2 people who'd saved each other watched the stars emerge, knowing with absolute certainty that they'd made the right choice. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and fear and pain. It had all led here. Home, real home. The kind built not from wood and stone, but from courage, from sacrifice, from love that refused to surrender. Eleanor McAllister leaned against her husband's shoulder and smiled. This was her life now, her family, her forever, and she wouldn't have it any other way.